How does a kid who first heard about Jesus at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, become a Reformed pastor in the Dutch Reformed tradition, and then somehow find his way back to speaking at a Calvary Chapel in-person pastors and prospective pastors training? Just an amazing story. And I'm Danny Hyde. This is my channel where theology becomes biography. Encourage you to continue to like, share, subscribe the channel, share it with others, encourage them as well, where I want to explain theology in a way that it becomes more and more people's biography. This past weekend, Friday and Saturday, I had the honor and the privilege of being one of the speakers at the Expositors Collective in-person training in Temecula. If you don't know the Expositors Collective, it is a group of pastors from the Calvary Chapel background who have a podcast, they do trainings, and just a lot of great stuff for the kingdom. I think I told the story of how I came into contact with Expositors Collective. I think it was on a podcast, or maybe it was like the little video I did for the conference I just spoke at. But a couple years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago maybe, I was weeding and I'm just looking for a podcast because I have a whole bunch of other ones on my phone. But I was looking for a pastor's podcast, a preaching podcast, pastoral ministry, something just for me to continue to grow and learn. And I know there probably are other podcasts out there, so, ignorance is bliss. So forgive me for those of you who might have a podcast out there, who might know of one on preaching, but I didn't know of one. I searched around and I found this episode, which was an interview with Brian Chappell. And Brian Chappell is a Presbyterian Church in America pastor, professor, wrote an influential book called Christ-Centered Preaching, which I've had to read, and my students at seminary have had to read, and so over the years I've gotten to learn that book and be able to interact with it. So I listened to the podcast, and it was a phenomenal podcast. It was basically Brian Chappell talking about don't be a pulpiteer, like just be a pastor, like be a normal person. So it's just a great podcast, very encouraging. And so I didn't know Expositors Collective at all, but I love that episode. So I just shot off an email and said, hey, I'm Danny Hyde. I pastor here in Oceanside, Carlsbad, California. I actually, came to church as a little kid because of my dad. My dad was converted at Calvary Costa Mesa back in the day when there was a tent outside. Pastor Chuck, Lonnie Frisbee, the whole gang. And my first memory of church is Sunday school, crying, being dragged there, Friday night movie nights, Thief in the Night, Crossing the Switchblade, the movies that were meant to scare you to come to Jesus. But I didn't, of course, come to faith until later. And when I was like 17 years old, I was converted. And yet in those years of conversion and college, I continued to listen to Chuck. My now wife and I, Cara Jean, we would attend Calvary Costa Mesa Monday nights. That was Greg Laurie night. We would go, message, worship, and I'd bawl my eyes out praying for my unsaved friends, neighbors, family members. Tuesday nights, of course, was back in the day Odin Fong night. That was a Signs and Wonders night. Wednesdays eventually became David Hawking night. So just phenomenal expository teaching through the Bible. And then like once a month, they would fly Chuck Missler down from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he would do his like crazy Chuck Missler thing. I was telling one of the other speakers at the conference, and he remembered. And I was like, yeah, I was there too, bro. Crazy time. So I told that story in my email to Expositors Collective, and I got an email back from Mike Neglia, who does the podcast, who's the host. And hey, I'm actually from Fallbrook, which is like right down the road from me. Calvary guy. Now I'm in Cork, Ireland. This and this and that. And then eventually I got another email, I think. He said, hey, I found an article of yours or a book, and hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And I was like, I'm a Reformed guy, I'm blown away you'd have a Presbyterian guy, let alone a Dutch Reformed guy, right? You're sort of ratcheting up here, the intensity. So I went on and it was great. And so we've struck up a friendship. And then, time goes by and eventually like I get this invite. Hey, would you be willing to speak at our in-person training that's going to be held in Temecula? And we've got 9 topics, and I'll let you pick which one you want. I was just blown away. Of course I'll speak. Like I'm willing to speak, anywhere to anyone. to share the gospel and to share, the lessons that I've learned in 26 plus years of teaching the Bible. So yeah, 100%, I'll do that. And so was able to then attend this weekend. I'm a total outsider. I tried to give the story a little bit, to sort of boost up my bona fides. Hey, my dad was converted back in the tent days, and I went to Calvary, multiple times a week when I was in college, so on and so forth. I'm now like kind of an outsider in the Dutch Reform world, of course, 'cause I didn't grow up in it. But then here I am at this conference where I'm the outsider again. So I guess kind of comes with the territory with me. But yeah, just a phenomenal conference. So I want to talk a little bit about the conference, the in-person trainings, more of a training, let alone a conference. But I was able to speak on the value and power of expository preaching. I'll hold off on what I said for that. I'll make another video, and eventually I'll be able to post the video itself. But I think I'll make a few more videos about preaching and just kind of share my thoughts on that. But there was also a great address session by Brian Stupar on inductive Bible study. And the session was great, but what I took away was, this is a great guy. Like we sat down next to each other at dinner and introduced ourselves, and we're sharing stories. He's from Huntington Beach, I'm from Redondo Beach, surfing, beach culture, Costa Mesa, Calvary, and we start talking about, of all things, John Owen. Here's this Calvary pastor in San Luis Obispo who's like, I love John Owen. John Owen's my guy. And I'm like, oh, I did a PhD on John Owen. Our eyes are like, wow, we're talking about John Owen here at a Calvary pastor's preaching, training. So, that just goes to say, like, people out there, brothers and sisters, people read books, people read material, like, don't pigeonhole everybody into like their little silo. So just, a great person, great conversation. The next day I was able to give him a copy of my dissertation, the bound version, and, just, hey man, like, enjoy this. It's going to be super dense, but hope you enjoy it. Hope it's fun for you. And we started talking about, he asked me like, hey, what was Owen's relationship to Oliver Cromwell? Like, what happened there, right? It's like, wow, this guy's in, like, he knows, some of the things that, we would probably assume, like, oh, if you're not Reformed, you don't know this stuff. Cody King spoke on Christ-centered preaching. Again, just a phenomenal session. And, back in the days, like when I was in Calvary Chapel, like I don't remember ever hearing about Christ-centered preaching. Like, the Old Testament was taught, of course, because the Bible was taught through, but it wasn't like a methodology of how to see Jesus as the hero of the story. That was what Cody King brought out, was like, hey, Jesus is the hero of the story, and when he's not, you descend into moralism. So I'm like, wow, Calvary Chapel has, like, this group of Calvary Chapel guys at least, has like really, really grown and like developed, homiletically, preaching wise, in terms of wanting to see Jesus in the Bible. So, when that video comes out, again, I'm going to share all these. These were just great. Dr. Alan Stoddard, he studied under Haddon Robinson, and he had a great address on how to outline a message. It was sort of like Haddon Robinson in like 15, 20 minutes. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but it was great. We struck up a conversation about him studying under Haddon Robinson, me under Edmund Clowney, and we're sharing stories, and just, again, phenomenal stuff to see that the broader, like, evangelical, reformed, like, understanding of preaching and exposition of the Bible, which we would argue, of course, in our tradition, like, hey, this is what we do. Like, Zwingli started doing this in 1519. Calvin taught through the Bible. Look at his commentaries and his massive corpus of sermons. Like, this is what we do. And of course, in the Calvary world, a lot of times people think that Calvary's the only one who teaches the Bible. Well, hey, we've been doing this for a long time too. We trace our roots back to the ancient church. But just great to see not just teaching the Bible, but a method to it, big ideas, points that flow out of that, applications that flow from the text, and so forth. Pilgrim Benham had a great address on homiletics. Danny Ramos on mentorships. Really important one, I thought, was the address on mentorships, like, very practical. We pastors and leaders who have young men, like how do we lead them? How do we guide them? In a more formal way, in terms of like identifying young men, like how do we plug them in with an older man, a seasoned man in our church, to just walk through life and to help them and to guide them, especially if they're interested in teaching the Bible. Like how do we do a better job? And this is just me like speaking personally. How do I do a better job? How does my congregation do a better job? How do we as a classis, our region of churches that I belong to, and our whole federation of churches, like how do we do a better job of mentoring young men to godliness, right? To holiness. Dr. Bob Franquiz, he's a PhD. Again, like back in the day of Calvary, like you don't go to college. Like Jesus is coming back tomorrow. The rapture is going to happen. Like why would you go to college? It's a waste of money. Go share the gospel before Jesus returns. So a PhD, he studied with Andreas Kostenberger, like a commentator that we all read. So just a great guy, fun guy, like very like knowledgeable. Again, just striking up these conversations, sparking up friendships with brothers from different churches, different parts of the vineyard, different branch of the vine, right? So just a great time. Trevor O'Keefe had a great message on how to find your own voice. He talked about the different like phases of his life. Preach this way, that way, this way, that way, and then eventually like just be yourself. That's like one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard when I was still a seminary student. The summer between my second and my last year, Kara Jean and I drove across country to a tiny town called Dune, Iowa, where the pastor had just taken a call to a much larger church in Grand Rapids, and so they were vacant. I was there for 10 weeks and got to teach, preach, lead, just do all the things that a pastor does. And the former pastor had come back at a certain time that summer to do a baptism, and got to know him a little bit. And what he said to me has always stuck with me. And he said, "Danny, be yourself. Be yourself." And he too was a former Pentecostal charismatic. He was like, just be yourself. You don't have to fit a mold. You don't have to try to be reformed in a pulpit, a pulpiteer, a preacher's voice. Like we've all done it. We've all gone through that phase. Be yourself. And so like for me, that's always been like a very passionate, intense, like I was converted in a very passionate, intense way. And so for me, like that passion and that intensity and that fire, of preaching has always been with me. I got that advice from him many years later, like 10, 12 years into the ministry here. Dr. Howell Jones, who was teaching at Westminster at the time, I had asked him to come out for 4 Sundays in a row. Would he listen to my preaching for a month? And then afterwards, could we debrief just to give me a reality check? Hey, can I get some, outside advice? I haven't been in seminary for a while. I have great elders, I have great people. How do I get some feedback from the outside looking in? So at the end of those 4 weeks, there was nitty-gritty details, but the big takeaway that he gave me was, and I've told this story before, he said in his Welsh accent, which I can't do, Danny, never lose your Pentecostal fire. Like just be yourself. And so finding your own voice, that was a great address as well. And the last one that I want to mention, there were 9 of them, and I want to mention this last one. Ted Leavenworth, who's the pastor of Reliance Church, which is out in Temecula, which hosted the conference, his address on the character of the pastor, I think it was Character Counts was the title, was like one of the most soul-stirring, challenging, yet encouraging messages that I've heard in quite a while. It was like listening to a Puritan, right? This is a Calvary Chapel guy, but listening to like the Puritan style of, your character, your holiness matters, right? Wasn't it Robert Murray M'Cheyne who said, what people need most is the preacher's holiness. Paul says, we have to keep guard over our teaching and our lives. Your character matters. It's not just what we say. It's not just, the methodology of how we say it. It's not, all that sort of pulpiteering, exegetical excellence and, genius. It's the person. How you say things, the person saying those things, like that matters. So I would wholeheartedly encourage you to subscribe to the Expositor Collective podcast. Just start dipping into the episodes. I'm a Reformed guy, and I'm probably, most of my audience is probably Reformed. You're not going to like everything. You're not going to agree with everything. That's life. But just so much wisdom, so much godliness, so much encouragement. A lot of the episodes are very like nitty gritty, like in how to do things. Other ones are more personal. Some deal with like ministry in hospitals. Other ones deal with church planting, how to replant a church. How do you have a staff if you have a bigger church? Like a lot of pastoral ministry stuff as well, other than just preaching. So I encourage you to do that, to subscribe to that channel, as well as when the videos come out, I'll be sharing them. And when I get some details about the next training, I'm not sure where it's going to be and when, but I would encourage you, if you're a aspiring pastor, if you are a pastor, especially my audience, Reformed guys, there's a whole world out there of exposition and homiletics and preaching that we've probably never like listened to and heard and appreciated and tried to glean from. So that's my big takeaway, is like the vineyard of the Lord is big. There are lots of sheep in the pen. The church has many branches of the vine, and it's encouraging for me to see people out there in different contexts, different styles, and different associations and networks and federations and whatnot, striving for preaching the word, preaching Christ, saving sinners, transforming lives, and through them transforming the world, right? So that's what we all pray for. So again, just encourage you to, on this channel, my channel, to like, to subscribe, and to share. I want this channel to be one where I'm not just teaching theology for your head, but that it also trickles down to your hearts and then through your hands, so that you're not learning just a big theology, but your theology is more and more increasingly and practically, your theology is becoming your biography.